We don't want them to be forgotten. We want them to be remembered all the time.
3 years after the deadliest school shooting in Texas history.
At 11:33 is when the suspect entered the school.
The room is full of victims.
Families still searching for answers.
It doesn't get easier. I think it gets harder, because at the beginning you're kind of like in that shock mode.
We've combed through reports and records.
Your Honor, you asked what answers have they been given. Well, this is the answers that they've been given.
Blocked almost every turn.
We've been at the trainings, the trials, tracking the progress and lack thereof. This is Uvalde, 3 years on.
Welcome into Uvalde 3 years on. This Saturday marks 3 years since a gunman entered Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, brutally murdering 19 children and 2 teachers. He barricaded himself in rooms 111 and 112 while 376 members of law enforcement personnel sat outside of the classroom and around there, waiting 77 minutes to enter the classrooms, kill the gunman, and start handling the carnage that was left behind. My name is Matt Roy. This is Jordan. This is Yami. We were all have relentlessly covered that situation over the last 3 years or so. Today, we look to reflect back on what we've covered, what we've seen, what's changed so far in 3 years. But guys, what's going on?
There are things that have changed. There are also a lot of things that have not, and a lot of answers that we're still waiting for. That's something that it feels like every year at this time, you kind of relive that day, but you also relive all of the times that you got stonewalled, because it's not even about us getting the information. It's so that the family members of all the victims can really know what happened. And to that point to this point, it hasn't happened.
And that's for them, but also for the public in general. There's nothing like driving up to school to pick up your child and you wonder if it happened today, would things be better than they were that day? It's a scary thought. I think about it every day when I drop off my kids at school, and just in my heart and head, I'm like, I hope that things would go right if an Uvalde happens. You never forget it.
Looking back on that day almost 3 years ago now, what comes to your mind? What do you think of, Yami, when you think of May 24th, 2022?
The first thing that I think of is driving in, because we drove in a little bit after it had started. And right when we were coming into Uvalde on Highway 90, everything just got like a foggy brown color. Do you guys remember that? And it was that brown foggy color, and driving in, I don't know what it was. It just changed the mood. And then getting there and just seeing the despair on people's faces, they like shell shocked. They didn't know what had happened to them. And then the hours continuing, people waiting to hear about their loved ones. The one thing I personally will not forget is having to cover the mass that the Archbishop did. And, he came over and he looked at me and he said, Mija, I think I need to pray for you. And he came over and he put his hands on me and he just prayed, that I would have the work to be able to do what I needed to do that night. And just thinking about the parents, you could not get that thought out of your head, what these families were going through.
Jordan was one of the first people on scene. I actually was off that day, the May 24th. Didn't end up off because Brian called me. But my first assignment was to start researching the shooter, who we won't name and haven't named in the past 3 years because we don't want to glorify that. But my first assignment was, who is this person? What can we find out? Sure enough, we started getting bits and pieces of information that they worked at a local Wendy's and, all those things, and that they tried to get weapons before their 18th birthday in multiple different ways. But all that information was hard to take in. Jordan, you were one of the first people on scene after we all heard that this is not good going out in Uvalde. Tell us about that.
Well, so my photographer and I were on a different story that day, and we got a call after an interview saying we got a call that there might be a shooter at this school. It may be nothing, but we need to go check it out. Can you guys get on the way? So we're driving, and, we were talking about how it's probably nothing. We show up to these a lot, but usually it's a threat or it's a drill and it's not real. And we, to be honest, we're in denial the whole way there. We were watching unmarked law enforcement vehicles go around us. Like there was a Jeep with police lights on it that were going around us, and we thought, oh, maybe there's a crash on the way there, like fully not wanting to believe that this could be as bad as we were hearing that it was. I still have my notebook from that day, and I was writing reminders for myself on how to pronounce Uvalde. So we got to Robb Elementary when they were still putting up the caution tape. And I think when we first got there, that's when I knew that this had to be real, because there were so many officers and units, and there were still a bunch of people running around. We were right by that Robb Elementary sign that you see all the time before they corded it off. And then they had us go over to the community center because they said, we'll have a press conference eventually, go over there. So we stood at that community center for hours and hours. It was the reunification site. So parents were coming in, trying to pick up their kids from Robb Elementary because they bust them all over there. And the kids were coming out with drawings, and the parents were crying because their kids were safe. And then eventually it got to the point where the only parents that were there, their kids were not safe. And that is what will stick with me forever, is seeing them after they got that news, and hearing them, because there's from the outside, there's nothing that you can do, but it was horrible.
As we've gone from 1 year to 2 years to 3 years, days have turned into weeks have turned into months, and things have started slowly kind of progressing in that town. This is still Texas, so some things that the families want, they'll never end up getting because of, gun control. They want gun control. They want gun ages raised and whatnot. So some of those things that they'll never end up getting. But as in the months following the shooting, when all the murals started coming about and the crosses started being put at, and people from all over the world started coming to Uvalde, it started to hit me the scope of the scope of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the day of, and maybe a couple days afterwards, I don't think I understood it. And then as soon as the 21 crosses started going, and as soon as, Meghan Markle was making her way down to Uvalde to pay tribute, and like all those things start happening, you're like, wow, this is something that is going to change me as a journalist, as a person. And it has considerably.
I think for me, she said something that resonated, which was no one wanted to believe this. We go through this so many times. That morning, like I usually do, before I come into work, I was actually getting my hair done. And that's when I got the call. And they were like, it was a source telling me it's not a game. You need to get out there. We got at least a few kids that have been shot and killed. And I said, are you sure? And they said, sure. I won't be able to call back for a bit. I called the station, and I still remember they were like, well, are you sure? Like no one wanted to believe it. And then another call came in 5 minutes later. Yami, it's more than 10. You guys have to hurry. And at that point, I was like, wow, okay, how are we going to cover this? What can we get out there? And it does change you as a journalist and the way you look at things. And I know people sometimes don't understand why we do the things we do, the way we do them. We were also the only source of information for these parents who are sitting in there, and a lot of us have sources, or we're right there and we can report what we're seeing, what we're being told by credible sources. So that always, you have to remember, what we do will forever be out there. This is the way these families and the town are going to remember these people who died. So we have to be very careful about what we do.
In the days and months after the shooting, what did you guys feel your role was? Because I very specifically felt that I had a role in our coverage,
Mm-hmm.
a role in trying to help the families, a role in multiple different things. I'll follow up. But what did you guys feel your role was as a person and as a journalist in the years and months that followed the shooting?
I think accountability to an extent. I've done several stories about active shooter training in Uvalde, because even last year when we were at 2 years, there were several officers at the county and city level that didn't have active shooter training even after. So I definitely accountability, but maintaining relationships with the families, because I feel that we have our role when something so tragic like this happens is to keep it in the news cycle and keep reminding people, because you can't learn from something if you forget about it.
Wow. That's a loaded one. I
Mhm.
think advocacy for the parents, for the victims, for the community. I think accountability, like you said. For me, it was at that moment, go in, do what I need to do, but I do investigative. So I knew that there was going to be an angle that I was going to work on and make sure that there was a change. I promised that to the Casares family when I walked up to their door and knocked on the door the second day. And there were national network media all lined up. And I went ahead and I kept walking, and I heard them when they said my name. They recognized me, and they told whoever was closer to the entrance to let me in. That was so humbling as a journalist. People have gone through the worst day of their life, and they recognized the work that I did, and they said for me to be allowed to come in. And I promised them that day, you may not see me out here every day, but I will find part of what caused all of this and will relentlessly work on it. And that's a positive that we're going to be reporting on this week.
Mhm.
Something positive that we have been able to push and push until it was changed. And I think that's part of what we're supposed to do, is make change, help for change so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, as journalists, I think that was our role. We were, you said it, Yami, the source of information for a lot of these families. They didn't find out about things
Yeah.
until we found out about them, which is not how it was supposed to be, not how it should have been.
It's still
It
some
still is
days
like that.
is that way.
Yeah, Brett, I mean, speaking to a lot of the families, they still don't get information first,
Mhm.
which is terrible. Whether it was the DOJ report, whether it was the DPS report, whether it was anything, we were kind of the conduit for that information for the families. So I felt like that was our role. Personally, I thought my role in the station, in the construct of the station, was important as well, because it's heavy. It's so heavy. The 19 kids, 2 teachers, the layers and layers and layers of failures that happened that day
Yes.
to make what happened possible. And it took a toll on everybody mentally. It was seeing what we had to see, talking about what we had to talk about, talking with people that were having the worst day, month, year of their lives.
Mhm.
Day after day after day is heavy. And so we were sending people daily down to Uvalde.
Mhm.
Sometimes we didn't have direction on a story or anything. It was, what's the story of the day? Let's go. We have to keep on it. And so whether it was me or Jordan or Amanda or anybody that was
Amanda
going,
Henderson, yeah.
Robin, I mean, everybody that was going down there, eventually people needed a break.
Yes.
And so everyone had a certain point where they were like, I can't go down there today. I just physically cannot do it. It's mentally too much on me. And so I thought my role was to just keep going, just shovel it all down and then figure it out later. But even then, I think it was in July, because I was going down there 2-3 days a week
Mhm.
for
Months.
3 months. I think it was in July. I was off that day, and I remember it distinctly. We lived on the west side on 90, and I was off. I was going to get some food or a beer or something, and I was driving down 90 next to 16, almost passing 1604, and I had to pull over because I just couldn't drive anymore. And it just all hit me.
Yeah.
And I just sat on the side of the road and I cried for like 30 minutes.
Mhm. It hits you at different times, and it's still like there are still days randomly in the middle of the year
Mhm.
where it just kind of comes back. And
it's hard. And
Yeah.
I think part of doing this podcast is so people understand. One of the things that I hate is when people say the FN word, which I don't like using the fake news. And I tell them, if you come out to do this job, you get to see that this is not fake. The
Mhm.
things that we do, and we chose to do this, it's a calling. To be a journalist is a calling. And when you accept that calling and you go to somewhere like Uvalde, and those parents are looking at you like, we need your help to get answers because we have that platform, we have to use it. I think for me personally, we were one of the 2 outlets that had unredacted videos from that day. It was CNN and us. And I can tell you, as someone that has seen all of the video from certain body cams, unredacted, it made me angry as hell. Angry, just angry that how could we not stop this from happening? How were we not prepared? You know, and you have to look at those families. And one person, I'm not going to say their name, looked at me after they knew that I had gotten them and they told me, "You saw my child, didn't you, on the videos?" And I said, "Yes, I did." They said, "I could tell the way you looked at me." And I told them it's not a pity look. It's a look of, we got to do better. We have to do better for all of us. We have to do better for all of us. And that's why we sometimes people say, oh, they keep at it because of ratings. That couldn't be furthest from the truth. It's not because of the ratings, because the ratings don't come in for just this. We do it because we still have a job to do to ensure that the legislators, the governor do what they're meant to do. And proof is the story that I'm doing this week. So I'm going to take a timeout on that one and say thank you, Governor Abbott, for listening to the relentless numbers of stories that we did. Because I was told the change that is being made to communications came directly from the governor's office.
One of the most rewarding parts over the last 3 years has been to get to know the families and the people that were affected, because ultimately this is all this affected them the most, obviously.
Yes.
Getting to know them to the extent that we have, to the point where this Saturday, Jordan and I have been invited by the families to have dinner with them on the day of the 3-year mark of the shooting, and to be family guests at the memorial that they're going to have, or the visual that they're going to have at 7:30 on Saturday. Getting to know them to that point and doing stories with them and getting to know them as people, this is the strongest group of people I've ever met in my life. Like, some of them have chosen to go and be out front more and travel to DC and advocate more for gun control and all that stuff. Some have chosen to, you know, like Addie Ruiz has chosen to kind of take a step back, doesn't want to do interviews, just wants to mourn on her own and kind of move forward like that. Steve as well, LEG's dad, he's chosen to kind of take a back step and not stay in the media and not get his face out there, because that's just how he's processing the trauma.
And it's all valid. Like, even if like the way that you're getting through it is just getting up every day and continuing on, like, that's when you've been through something like this, it's all valid. It's all an accomplishment.
Yeah, I can't say enough about how strong every single one of them is, from Brett to Berlinda to Javier to everybody. I don't want to leave anybody out, but every single family has dealt with this in their own way, and it still hurts 3 years on, and it's going to continue to hurt. So I want to get to our first story here that we'll play. This is going to be a story that airs on Saturday on both News 4 and Fox SA, but I was able to speak to some of the families just about how they've processed the last 3 years and how they're continuing to process it. So let's listen to that first.
It gets harder and harder as each day passes.
It doesn't get easier.
It's an unbearable pain that nobody should go through.
Every day, the families of the Uvalde victims are reminded of the worst day of their lives.
Story is when the suspect entered the school at the door that I'm pointing to now.
Hey, watch windows! Watch windows!
In this town, it's a constant reminder, and unfortunately, it's always going to be that for us.
As the years go by, then you begin to realize, like, this is reality. There is no, Thanksgiving that you're going to have them at the table. There is no Christmas that you can buy them a gift anymore.
Over the past 3 years, the families have tried to ensure that their loved ones didn't die in vain, mainly by advocating for stricter gun laws at both the state and the federal level.
Why is it that you and so many of the others that we know so well have chosen to kind of be out front with this?
Because we don't want them to be forgotten. We want them to be remembered all the time.
We're here as mission now, and we're going to keep on trying, regardless of how difficult it is, because enough is enough.
She would want us to go out and fight for everyone.
the families are slowly but surely seeing some change in their town, which they say helps them try to move forward. But every year, when the calendar turns to May, they're reminded that the pain is there, and it always will be.
How do you continue to move forward? Like, what does your daily life kind of look like? Do you just kind of live on and remember every second of every day
For me-
what Amory is?
For me, it's an everyday constant, reminder. I wake up and I think about her. I have a little shrine of hers in my house. I go talk to her. I still communicate with her every day because she's still with me every single day. That's not going to change, and that's never going to change for me because I love her and I miss her so much.
Thank you to Berlinda and Javier and Jesse for letting me talk to them and tell their story about that. Guys, as you've gotten to know the families more, what strikes you as how they've handled this over the last 3 years?
Wow. I just look at them and I keep thinking about it. I don't know if I could do that. I really don't. I cannot imagine, this little child that I carried for 9 months and I took care of and, cherished more than anything in my life, all of a sudden being brutally murdered in a place where I thought I left them safe. So I look at them, and when I talk to them, I try to be very respectful. I try to explain things. Not everybody's always going to be happy to see you with what we have to ask, but they always answer the phone calls and they tell you when they can't do it. And I think they appreciate it, but it's just the resilience that they have. And a lot of them, this is their why. Their why is to make sure it doesn't happen again. And their why is to remember their children and the teachers that died that day.
And to be so resilient, and not only to have to go up against what they went through and the grief that goes along with that, but I think what a lot of people don't know is there is a big part of Uvalde and of South Texas that is kind of urging everyone to move on. And how do you move on?
Especially their town.
Yeah.
Yes. And so to still be there and to still be fighting up against all of that, I have the utmost respect for all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the majority of their own town is sick of hearing about it.
Yeah.
Which has got to be really, really difficult for all of them to know that you're living in a town where people have moved on and you're still living with a daily reminder, whether it's, the new school that's being built, Legacy Elementary, or you drive by the square, there's always going to be something that they look and say, I used to do this and this with Uzziah.
I should be doing
this. Right. Like, it's just, I can't imagine that hurt, but also having to fight so hard in the one place where you would expect people to understand, and they just don't.
No. But Uvalde had problems before this. Uvalde's always been a divided community. The DOJ report, even though it was done by people from outside of Texas, hit something on the nose. It is a community that was divided by culture. It truly was. And I think some of those issues came to head when this happened. I think a lot of people also, it's an older community and a lot of people very strong and just, okay, let's just move forward and be done with this. And some of the people that I've spoken to, there's some that I consider friends now, and they say this, and I just look at them and I'm like, you do realize it's their child. What if it was your child? Would you say, okay, that's it, let's move on. Let's just bury it and be done with it.
Right.
Yeah, there's Shimon, Amanda, Lee, as the three of us. I feel like the six of us have been relentless to the point where the families trust us the most. I was speaking with Berlinda, and just there's some people that, like, some journalists, obviously everyone wants to talk to them because that's the story, and that's part of our journalistic duty. But there's some that they've clicked with and some that they haven't. There's some that go in there and are respectful and do it the right way. And there's some that just go in there and are trying to hound dog them or bulldog them. And that's just not the way you handle these situations. So I've been very proud to work on a team that has, I think, done this the right way, between the three of us and with Amanda as well. And work with alongside people like Lee, who handled this the right way and now works at CNN, Shimon, who handled this the right way and works at CNN, except for them dropping that one thing, one report like 4 hours before we were supposed to.
Yes.
That was,
yes.
That was mean of them.
Yeah. Well,
But
and that's the way it happens. But you're right. And they know when you go in, people know your reputation. They know what you're going to do. They know you're coming there and you're staying with this because it's much more than a story. We want classrooms that the locks lock correctly. We want officers who are trained with what they're supposed to be trained with. If I give you a gun and a badge and I give you the right to take someone's life and their liberty, then you better damn well have every course that is required of you. And I think that's some of what the anger is, that all these things were not done. And now you come to the point of how can we make things better? And I think that's a lot of what we try to do as journalists, because even we have to fight some days and say, no, the story has to be done today on this because they're going to take a vote, or because this has to be done in a timely manner. I mean, there's so much more that goes to getting this out there and making sure it doesn't happen again.
Right. Making sure that the money that people donated is being used correctly, making sure the families are getting the things that they've been promised. To this day, we haven't seen information or documents about what went wrong that day from the school district and from the sheriff's office. Just in the past year, we've gotten documents from the city of Uvalde and body cam and text messages and things like that. There are still answers out there 3 years later. And I do think looking at other shootings that have happened around the country, whether they acknowledge it or not, they did learn from this. Yes. And the way that they handled the aftermath and the preparation have changed because of Uvalde.
You want to introduce your package?
Sure. One of those things that still hasn't happened 3 years later is a permanent memorial for the students and teachers that are killed that day. In this upcoming story and in a lot of the video, you'll see the white crosses at the town square around the fountain and at Robb Elementary, but those have always been meant to be temporary. And then recently, there was vandalism at Robb Elementary where those crosses were toppled over. So we got to speak with some family members about the push to get something more permanent, where that's going to go, and how they feel about the fact that it has taken this long.
It appears that someone came in and pushed all the crosses, turned them around so where they weren't facing out. They did push over at least one of them.
For Sandra Cruz, the damage to these crosses is more than physical.
They mean the world to us. They represent our babies.
She made a heartbreaking discovery in early May, the memorial for her daughter Ellie, her classmates, and her teachers. Twisted, toppled, and desecrated.
There was broken glass and pebbles on the floors. I was like in disbelief.
Another wound for families that are still healing. These crosses were meant to be temporary, but for some, temporary is no longer acceptable. Not 3 years after the shooting.
They're not permanent memorials, and I think part of that solution is getting a permanent memorial.
But that process has been slow moving.
It's been 3 years. Why is it even taking this long when we were promised in the very beginning that they were going to knock this out?
The city will work with the community representatives of the families.
We could see that change in the coming months. In late April, officials finalized a settlement agreement between the city and the families.
Today's agreement marks an important step forward in advancing community healing.
A permanent memorial at the city plaza is part of that agreement, and state funding could soon be on the way. A line in the proposed budget sets aside $10 million to construct and maintain a memorial for the lives lost at Robb Elementary.
My hope is over the course of the next several sessions, we can do some kind of state park there or state funded park that would memorialize the lives of these children.
For some parents, though, it's about more than remembrance. It's about visibility.
So that everybody has to see our children and remember this, because a lot of people want us to get over it. I want them to see it. I want them to remember.
The Uvalde Police Department recently installed this camera, so if any other vandalism were to happen, they'll be able to see it. Volunteers have also come out and refurbished all of these crosses, getting them back looking nice again. The Uvalde Police Department says no arrests have been made yet, but they have several leads they're following up on.
Jordan, what'd you learn in the course of doing that?
I learned that there are still, like, the families still feel such, I guess, a sense of people wanting to forget, because to deface a memorial like that at the site where it happened, I think that they were horrified, but I don't think they were surprised. It was sad to me that they were not surprised by that.
They weren't at all. I think I spoke to 3 or 4 of them that on that day, and they were just like, yeah.
Par for the course is
Yeah.
essentially their thoughts, which is so sad.
You know what was upsetting to me was the fact that there was a trooper there. We need to follow up with that. The trooper was sitting directly across that door that everybody now knows where the bodies were brought out, on the side where he went in. And the trooper was sitting there, and, you know, the seat was allegedly back. And once they honked on the horn, he sat up. And it was like, why is your seat back? How are you going to watch if your seat's back? And they had just gotten there. And I also want to say, you know, it's a lot of people, this in law enforcement, this affected them. I don't think anybody ever would want to go into a scene like that at all. And the failures of that day in training, that goes to the higher ups. The higher ups tell you what training you're going to do. Do they have it? If they don't have it, then you need to go get it done. So I think a lot of enforcement are still dealing with the effects of this. I know that some people were pointed out unjustly, I believe, I've come to learn, and they deal with a lot of it, and they still carry the weight of what happened there that day, even ones that weren't there, that were out of town, you know, on conferences, and they blame themselves for not being there. I don't think anyone could have expected what happened that day. It was just the perfect storm. The door not locking. Start off with that. Even before that, at the Oasis, I did the story, getting the video of when the shooter walked in and was there several days, buying the ammunition, buying all the things he needed. And you see a group of workers that were there, and they all kind of stood back. And you could tell, like, by their face, the way that he was holding it and doing all this, they could tell something was off. I have a friend that does sell, you know, weapons here in Texas. And I asked, how do you guys know? And he said, when we get that feeling and they walk in and you get that funky feeling, I've told them to just fill out the paperwork and then come back and say it didn't go through. Come back in 3 days. And they usually don't come back, because you cannot say, no, I can't sell you a weapon. So I think most people know, and you have to really listen to your instincts. So for law enforcement, a lot of them, nobody wanted this to happen. No one wanted it to happen. And I think some of them have really taken it extremely hard, depression and dealing with other things, but we never get to talk to them, because if they come out and they speak about this, they're blackballed. And then they have to get mental health and go to counseling, but then they're blackballed in their career. So I think that's been hard for a lot of them.
Looking forward, there's lawsuits, there's indictments, there's all this stuff going on. Jordan, do you want to kind of touch on some of it first?
Yeah. So like we told you a little bit ago, we still haven't seen documents from the school district and the sheriff's office. That is all still pending in court. There are several media organizations that have sued to get access to those things. This is all of the public records requests that we all put in the days after that they said you don't have a right to see. So the Department of Public Safety, same thing. We still haven't seen those documents. And their argument is that there is not a reason to release it. It's part of an active investigation. But then the attorneys for the media organizations are arguing that taxpayers paid for those records. They should get to see them. So all of that is still going on. I've been covering the criminal trial for former District Police Chief Pete Arredondo and former Officer Adrian Gonzalez. There are just mountains of evidence to go through in that case. So we really don't know when that's going to eventually go to trial. But that's all been going on as well.
I do think it's amazing, in a bad way, that almost 3 years later, I still don't think I've actually ever spoken to the DA.
I've spoken to her.
I have not spoken to her like one-on-one. I've gotten 3 emails maybe.
Yeah. I spoke to her at the beginning because she wanted to get information out. So a source who knows her very well said, I know this reporter, she would be willing to do a Zoom, and we did a Zoom, and she wanted the information to go out where the families could go for help. And, legally, do we understand where she's coming from? We do, but so much of it is out there already. So, and what gets me again goes back to the point of what is in there that we don't know that we need to protect other children in the state of Texas.
The lessons learned,
Yes.
the things that.
Yes. And you can't do that without the records. The law enforcement can't do it outside of there without those records.
Yeah,
They need them.
and she was kind of leading the charge in blocking the release of a bunch of stuff for years. And that's where the families were resentful, was that like they didn't care if it was out in the public. They just wanted it. They wanted to know. Brett Cross, one of the probably the most outspoken member of all of the families, for good or for bad, he just wants to know everything that had to do with his child. That's all he wants. He wants to know why it happened, what happened, who failed. And he will never have full closure until he gets that. And these families just won't have that until they get all of the information. And that's the part that, like, even if we don't get it, if we're not able to do a story on it, like, okay, but they deserve to know.
And her perspective too, partially, is you get one shot at a criminal trial. So if any of this stuff gets out before it's supposed to, or if anything compromises that, do you get justice? So that, to my understanding, that is part of her perspective. But you can see it both ways. Like either way, this is really, really tough. And for it to be 3 years later and to still be waiting is tough.
What was so hard on a lot of these families, though, was the trickle of information. Like it was like them getting punched in the gut once a month for 3 years.
And it kept happening around holidays.
Oh my God.
So many announcements
every
happened
time
right before Christmas or right before Thanksgiving.
Right before something good was going to happen.
Yes.
It was always like a day or two before a birthday or an anniversary or like a memorial service or something. Like every single time the DOJ report or the DPS report, anything came out, it was always right before something good was about to happen. And they were like, again, you're really going to do this to us again?
The timing.
Yeah.
It's the timing. And how much should the government think about the timing when, you can't have it both ways. You're asking for information, but when do you put it out? When do you not put it out? I don't think anybody was really thinking about that sometimes on that side of it. I don't know. This to me could be a PhD thesis on what not to do, for PR. This was a nightmare, the way they've trickled it.
And other agencies have learned, like the Covenant school shooting in Nashville. They were out with everything immediately.
They handled that well.
Learning from this.
Yeah. Before we get to our last thing, which is the murals on the way out, just floor is your guys' closing thoughts on where we are now, where we were, what has changed you in this. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, I'm going to say, I've been doing this for 20 some years, and the amount of dedication, both of you, Amanda Henderson, Robin, who's no longer here, the amount of dedication that you guys put to this, because you're rookies. You were rookies 3 years ago. You were still rookies, but man, you guys, I'm proud to work with you. And I know it's been a lot. I wish I could tell you that someday you just won't cry over it. You won't cry for these families. It never stops. It never stops because it's your humanity, and we should never lose that. As a journalist, our job is to listen to everyone. I am glad, though, personally, I can say thanks to the people in Uvalde like Forrest Anderson, who deals with the communications. The story on Saturday is going to talk about that, the change now. You know, when you saw them talking, one would come to the door to get information. It was like playing telephone.
Literally.
You know, literally, that's how they were getting their information or not getting it at all. The chief of police from Uvalde was in New York City recently and was able to radio down to dispatch in Uvalde with the brand new radios they received, thanks to the governor who finally did what he should have done in 2015 when we first knew that there were issues. So what we do does matter. And to the families, I mean, not a day that I don't think about you when I drop my children off.
Think about that too. 3 years ago, Pete Arredondo knowingly left his radio in his patrol car.
Yeah.
Knowing that it wouldn't
work in the hallway of that room or of that building.
Insane.
Like, and now that's happening.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's another example. We, even from the first day that we were out there, that was the mentality that we were using is all the networks are here right now. Everybody's here right now, but we will be there after they leave. And I think that we have followed through on that and we will continue to follow through on that. And I think, I mean, speaking for myself, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I am a different person.
you're my wife. You can speak for me.
We are different people than before that day. So it's taught us a lot.
Yeah. I think when you're in journalism school, you go through law classes, you go through ethics classes, and they try and prep you for the right way to handle these situations. Nothing can prepare you for handling one of these situations. I don't think there's definitely a wrong way to do it, but I don't know if there's a template that can be the right way to handle one of these things. Like in journalism school, you're taught, like, if you go to coffee with a source, don't let them buy you coffee and you don't buy theirs because you don't want to have any error of bias or anything like that. This is just so much different. It's so much bigger. It's so much bigger than that. And so I think what I've learned is that you can never lose your humanity or your emotion when you're telling these stories, even no matter how hard it is, because it's freaking hard. But that's what makes good journalists, is knowing that you're doing this for a reason, that you're doing it for the greater good, that you're doing it for the families that deserve the answers, that you're just doing it to make change. And so I echo Yami's thoughts. I'm very proud to work on a team where I think we handled it the right way.
Yeah, and this was also to, you know, peel the onion a little so people can see why we do things the way that we do them and cover it the way we do. And also the people behind the scenes. Those packages were done by Paul Sanchez,
who was out there from day one.
And he's my partner now. I work with him. People like Javier, who's sitting next to us, and Bob, who's sitting over there, and Kelly, who works production.
Well, in the countless people that went out there, Carry On and Colton and Zach, who was out there, like everybody who went out to see Simone, who was field anchoring from out there, Ryan, like everybody on the team that contributed to all of that effort has done a phenomenal job.
It was all hands on deck for a long time.
So we're going to close this out with the one way that it should be, with murals of all of the deceased children and teachers. One thing I want to say before we get to it is just to the families, thank you for letting us tell your stories over the past 3 years. Thank you for getting to know us. Thank you for letting us get to know you. Thank you for accepting us. And I hope that over the last 3 years, we've done something that has made it easier, even though it's never going to be easy and you'll never get over it like people have told you. I hope that we have helped a little. You'll always be in my heart. I wear Ava Strong bracelet everywhere I go. Never comes off.
You're wearing maroon today.
I'm wearing maroon today. I mean, this is something that will be with the three of us and with everybody at our station forever. And thank you so much for letting us be part of your story as you continue to move forward. So I want to close this out. Hopefully everyone remembers their names, because you always should be. Thank you so much for tuning in.